The Haelor Empire made a grave mistake when they captured and tortured 12-year-old Craig Henry of Earth, not realizing the hellish fury that humanity would unleash in retaliation for such a heinous act against a child. Craig woke with a jolt, finding himself strapped naked to a cold metal operating table, blinding lights glaring down on his small, fragile body. Spiker, a towering insectoid breen scientist, loomed over him, its compound eyes gleaming with cruelty as razor-sharp mandibles clicked together menacingly mere inches from Craig's tear-streaked face. "Please, let me go," Craig whimpered, voice quivering with terror. "I want to go home." Spiker let out a harsh, guttural clicking noise, a chilling approximation of laughter. "Foolish child, you are never leaving this place. We will be conducting many painful experiments on you to learn the weaknesses of your pathetic species. If you cooperate, you will suffer marginally less before your inevitable death. If you resist, well, we have ways of making you comply." The insectoid reached over to a tray of wicked-looking surgical implements, plucking a long, gleaming scalpel from the arsenal of blades and needles and lasers. As it lowered the razor edge toward Craig's heaving chest, the boy let out an agonized scream that reverberated through the secret asteroid lab. Little did the sadistic breen realize that Craig's parents, both high-ranking Earth Force officers, would stop at nothing to rescue their son. And in abducting the child, the Haelor Empire had just provoked the mighty wrath of all humanity, an enemy far more dangerous and determined than they could ever imagine. The stage was set for a brutal conflict in which the very survival of mankind hung in the balance. Light years away from the secret asteroid lab where young Craig Henry suffered, Admiral Marcus Thorne sat hunched at his desk in the heart of Sol Command, poring over a top-secret communiqué. The grizzled veteran's brow furrowed as he read the intercepted breen chatter, his stomach twisting into knots. They had a human child, a research facility deep in breen space. Biometric scans matched the boy to Craig Henry, the 12-year-old son of a high-ranking Earth diplomat. Marcus exhaled slowly, the weight of the situation pressing down on his broad shoulders. If word got out, if the public learned of this unspeakable transgression, it would mean war. A bloody, brutal conflict with a savage enemy. As much as part of him longed to set the galaxy ablaze in righteous retribution, he knew that he couldn't risk countless human lives in a reckless crusade. But to leave a child an innocent in the clutches of those monsters, to abandon him to unimaginable torment and an inevitable ugly demise? Marcus couldn't bear the thought. He had dedicated his life to protecting humanity, and that included the most vulnerable among them. No, he had to act, but it would have to be swift, surgical, and secret. Rising from his chair, Marcus strode to his office door and locked it securely. Then he went to the secure comms panel and input a complex encryption key. "Spartan Team 6, he said grimly. "Report to Sol Command immediately for a top-priority mission briefing." Within an hour, the elite Black Ops unit had assembled in a dimly lit conference room deep within the command center. Captain Alistair Graves, the team leader, stood at stiff attention, his chiseled features inscrutable. Marcus brought up the classified intelligence on the displays and watched the hardened warriors' expressions shift as they absorbed the horrific implications. "Craig Henry is only 12 years old," Marcus said solemnly. "He hasn't received any of the augmentations or enhancements that give you Spartans your edge. He's just a regular kid, ripped away from his family and thrown into a nightmare. Getting him out of that hellhole will be incredibly dangerous." Captain Graves stepped forward, his gaze fixed on a candid photo of a beaming Craig surrounded by his loving parents. "Admiral, Spartan Team 6 will bring that boy home," he declared, his voice unwavering. "I swear it on my life." Marcus saw a flicker of pain in Alistair's eyes, remembering the hushed stories of the son he had lost to cancer years ago. He understood that this mission was deeply personal for the battle-hardened captain. Nodding curtly, Marcus clasped Graves's shoulder. "Bring our boy back, Captain, and Godspeed." As the Spartan team silently boarded a sleek stealth frigate and vanished into the cold vastness of space, Admiral Marcus Thorne could only clasp his hands and pray that they would reach Craig Henry before the unspeakable happened. The clock was ticking, the child's life hanging by a thread, and the fates of both Craig and Earth's warriors were inextricably intertwined. In the silence of his office, Marcus whispered a fervent plea. "Hold on, Craig. Hold on." As Craig lay strapped to the operating table, his small body trembling with fear and pain, Spica loomed over him, compound eyes gleaming with sadistic anticipation. The insectoid scientist's spindly fingers traced the boy's exposed skin as if deciding where to cut first. "Subject shows signs of distress." Spica clicked into a recording device, commencing physiological analysis. Without warning, a scalpel flashed in the harsh light, slicing into Craig's chest. The boy screamed, thrashing against his restraints as blood welled from the incision. Spica watched impassively, making note of the depth and width of the wound, the color and consistency of the blood. The torture disguised as science continued for hours, days, weeks. Craig lost all sense of time as the Breen subjected him to an endless litany of horrors. They snapped his bones like twigs, studying how they splintered and shattered. They injected him with caustic chemicals that burned through his veins, documenting his agonized convulsions. They locked him in chambers that simulated the vacuum of space, watching as his eyes bulged and his skin blistered in the cold void. They bombarded him with radiation until his hair fell out in clumps and his flesh sloughed away. Through it all, Craig pleaded for mercy, for death, for anything to end the unrelenting torment. But the Breen were unmoved by his suffering, viewing him as nothing more than a test subject to be dissected and discarded. In his brief moments of fitful sleep, Craig dreamed of rescue, of a team of human soldiers storming the asteroid and saving him from this nightmare. He could almost feel their strong arms lifting him up, carrying him to safety. But inevitably, he would jolt awake to find himself still strapped to the table, Spica's impassive visage filling his blurry vision. The insectoid would tilt its head, mandibles clicking, as if disappointed that the boy had survived another session. One day, or night, Craig couldn't tell anymore, the torture reached a new level of brutality. Spica flayed the skin from Craig's arm, peeling it away in meticulous strips to expose the twitching muscles beneath. The pain was beyond anything Craig had ever imagined, a white-hot agony that consumed his entire being. As he finally slipped into merciful unconsciousness, Craig thought he heard a shrill alarm blaring in the distance, the sounds of panicked clicking and skittering feet. But before he could process what was happening, his heart stuttered and stopped, the monitor flatlined. Spica chittered in annoyance, spindly fingers flying over the controls as it attempted to resuscitate the boy. Not out of any concern for Craig's well-being, but because the experiments were not yet complete. The insectoid refused to let its prized specimen expire before it had extracted every last bit of data. Slowly, tortuously, Craig's heart began to beat again, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. As awareness returned, so did the pain, the despair, the knowledge that his nightmare was far from over. Spica loomed over him once more, scalpel glinting in its grasp, ready to begin anew. As Craig's lifeless body lay on the operating table, the Breen scientists erupted into a heated argument, their insectoid voices clicking and chittering with agitation. Some of them wanted to simply dispose of the corpse and move on to the next unfortunate test subject. Others insisted that they could still glean valuable data by reviving the boy and continuing their cruel experiments. Spica silenced the bickering with a sharp hiss, its mandibles clicking authoritatively. The lead scientist had already made its decision. They would perform a thorough autopsy on the body to extract every last bit of information from the expired specimen. Just as Spica reached for a wicked-looking bone saw, intending to crack open Craig's ribcage, a piercing alarm blared through the facility. The Breen scrambled to the security monitors in confusion and growing dread. On the screens they witnessed a scene of utter carnage. Spartan Team 6 was rampaging through the asteroid base like an unstoppable force of nature, ruthlessly slaughtering every Breen soldier that dared to stand in their way. Captain Graves spearheaded the assault, a plasma rifle blazing in each hand, as he incinerated the insectoid warriors with cold, merciless precision. The air crackled with the stench of charred chitin and seared flesh as breen after breen fell to the Spartans' relentless onslaught. Panic gripped the scientists as they realized the humans were heading straight for the lab. With trembling appendages, they initiated the emergency lockdown protocols and armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find, preparing to make their last stand against the vengeful Spartans. Spica, however, refused to abandon its prize. The Breen scientist scurried back to Craig's body, determined to extract the boy's brain before the humans could interfere. With single-minded focus, Spica began to lower the bone saw toward Craig's chest, the wickedly serrated blade whirring with ominous purpose. But just as the saw bit into the boy's pallid flesh, Craig's eyes snapped open. They were no longer the frightened, pain-filled eyes of a child, but something far more ancient and implacable. An unearthly light seemed to flicker behind those unblinking orbs as Craig slowly sat up, heedless of the straps that had once held him down. Spica recoiled in shock, its compound eyes widening in disbelief as Craig rose from the table like a puppet, jerked upright by unseen strings. Before the insectoid could react, the boy's small hands shot out, seizing Spica's head in an iron grip. With a swift, brutal twist, Craig wrenched Spica's head to the side. A sickening crack echoed through the lab as the Breen's exoskeleton shattered, ichor spraying from its ruptured throat in a grotesque fountain. The other scientists, momentarily frozen in horror, suddenly opened fire on Craig with their energy weapons, but to their growing terror, the searing bolts passed harmlessly through the boy's body, as if he were nothing more than a ghostly apparition. Craig turned slowly to face the remaining Breen, his expression eerily blank. When he spoke, his voice resonated with an ancient, otherworldly power that sent chills down the insectoid's spines. As the eldritch words poured from Craig's lips, the Breen scientists began to convulse violently, their compound eyes bulging as green blood hemorrhaged from every orifice. One by one, they collapsed to the floor, their exoskeletons crumpling like empty husks. In a matter of moments, the once bustling lab fell silent, the only sound being the soft, steady drip of ichor from the lifeless bodies of the Breen. And there, standing amidst the carnage, was Craig. Or rather, the entity that now possessed his broken, battered form. The being that had once been a terrified, tortured child slowly turned its ancient gaze towards the door, as if sensing the approach of the Spartan team. It took a step forward, its movements unnaturally fluid and graceful, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy, as the vengeful humans and the inscrutable entity wearing Craig's face prepared to collide in a cataclysmic showdown. With a thunderous blast, Spartan Team 6 breached the reinforced door of the Breen laboratory. Captain Graves rushed in, plasma rifles at the ready, his heart pounding in his chest. But as he took in the scene before him, his blood ran cold. Craig lay motionless on the operating table, his small body ravaged by the Breen's relentless torture. Graves sprinted to the boy's side, his hands trembling as he fumbled for a pulse. Nothing. He pressed his fingers harder against Craig's neck, desperate for even the faintest flutter of life. Still nothing. "No," Graves whispered, his voice cracking with grief. "No, no, no." He gathered Craig's limp form into his arms, cradling the boy against his armored chest. The child's head lolled lifelessly, his once bright eyes now dull and empty. Graves let out an agonized howl, a sound of pure, raw anguish that echoed through the cold, sterile lab. The other Spartans stood frozen, their weapons lowered, their faces etched with sorrow and rage. They had fought so hard, pushed themselves to the brink, all to save this one innocent life, and they had failed. Graves rose slowly, clutching Craig's body close. He turned to face his team, his eyes blazing with a fury that even his helmet couldn't conceal. "We're taking him home," he said, his voice low and thick with emotion. "He deserves that much." As the Spartans made their way back to the stealth frigate, a heavy silence hung over them. They had seen death before, dealt it out in spades, but this was different. This was a child, an innocent, whose life had been snuffed out by an enemy's cruelty. Aboard the ship, Graves gently laid Craig's body on a makeshift bier, arranging his limbs with a tenderness that belied his battle-hardened exterior. He removed his helmet, revealing a face lined with grief and exhaustion. Just then, an urgent transmission crackled over the comm system. It was sole command, and the news was grim. The Breen, emboldened by the information they had extracted from Craig, had launched a full-scale assault on human space. Reports flooded in, each more devastating than the last. Colonies burned, their inhabitants slaughtered without mercy. Ships exploded in the void, their crews consigned to a cold, airless death. The Breen's savagery knew no bounds, and humanity reeled under the onslaught. Graves listened in silent horror, his fists clenched at his sides. The war they had all feared, the conflict they had tried so desperately to prevent, had begun, and it was all because they had failed to save one small, fragile life. He looked down at Craig's still, pale face, a face that would never again light up with laughter or joy. In that moment, Graves made a silent vow. The Breen would pay for what they had done. They would answer for every drop of innocent blood they had spilled. Even if it took his last breath, he would make them regret the day they dared to cross the line. As the frigate slipped away from the asteroid, Graves input a series of commands into his wrist computer. Far below, the antimatter charges they had planted during their infiltration detonated, consuming the Breen base in a blinding flash of light. The asteroid shattered, reduced to a cloud of ash and debris that blossomed silently in the void. It was a small victory, a tiny measure of vengeance against the monsters who had taken Craig's life. But it was only the beginning. Graves knew that the road ahead would be long and bloody, that humanity would suffer losses beyond imagining. But in the end, the Breen would learn the true cost of their arrogance and cruelty. They would learn to fear the wrath of a species pushed beyond the brink. Looking down at Craig's lifeless hand, so small and fragile in his own, Graves made another promise. He would be the instrument of that wrath, the avenging angel that would rain down justice on the Breen. For Craig, for every innocent life they had stolen, he would make them pay. Even if it killed him. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.